Welcome to the Guns N' Noses podcast. My name's Helen Taylor and I am the owner of Guns N' Noses, and I own 3 Labradors. We're here to talk about real moments, real lives, and the wins, the wobblers, and the occasional up yours moments. We're talking about those dogs with enthusiasm and us humans who are trying to keep up. So why don't you sit back, grab a brew, slow down, and listen in. Hello and welcome back to the Guns N' Noses podcast. Today I would really like to talk about nervous dogs, and this request has actually come in from one of my listeners and very good client, somebody who I speak to and am in contact with fairly regularly, somebody who recommends me quite a lot when in our local area if people are asking for recommendations on dog trainers. So she's asked me to do a podcast on nervous dogs, and that is what I would like to talk about today, because it's really important that I give you information that you need. And for those listeners who have taken the time to actually reach out and ask me to do a particular topic, then that's where I'd like to take the podcast. But if you have a nervous dog, you will know that living with one who worries about maybe new people or people in general, not just new people, they might worry about other dogs or noises or new places, you'll definitely know how heartbreaking it is to live with one of these dogs, because you definitely do want to help them. And that's something that us humans who care about the animal that we live with or the animals that we live with, if we see them struggling in any way, we would hope, or I would hope, that you would want to do something to help them out. And the main objective of our ownership or guardianship is to keep our animals safe. And when you have a dog who worries about things, being able to keep them safe and secure is one of our top priorities. But sometimes it can just feel like you're not quite sure what the right thing is to do. You've maybe tried a few different things or taken advice from different people, and it's just not cutting the mustard. It's just not working for you. But each dog who struggles and each human or each carer of that dog is on a very different journey. It's very unique to you. This story isn't just about one cap fits all. It's very unique in your life. And that's something that I would really like you to take hold of, is that just because your dog maybe doesn't cope particularly well in certain circumstances, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something you've done wrong. But also, if you try and compare yourself to somebody else, and maybe they've improved their dog's reluctance to engage with a new person or other dogs in the street, it doesn't mean to say that you've done anything wrong and that you aren't capable, because every journey is very, very unique. So a nervous dog isn't trying to misbehave. What they're trying to do is cope with something that feels scary. Imagine being asked to, let's take spiders, okay, because I'm particularly frightened of spiders, but let's imagine somebody has asked you to go into a room where there is a spider and they want you to look at it. They maybe want you to move it for them. For some people, that might be absolutely fine. For others, it would feel totally overwhelming. And that, for me, is where I would sit. I would sit in the totally overwhelming. I had a situation not so long ago where I was at home with my little girl and my husband was out at work, and out the corner of my eye, I saw a huge spider, or in my mind, it was a huge spider. And I sat there and I thought, oh my God, I need to move that spider, because I couldn't forget about it. And I thought for a while, who could I ring? Who could I ring to get rid of this spider? Now, there wasn't really anybody. It was about 10 o'clock at night and there was nobody to call. So I had to put my big girl pants on, and the only thing I could think of was to get a pint glass and pop it over the top of it. And I thought, fine, if I can do that, I can leave it there till the next day and my husband will remove it. Not a problem. Well, I did the glass and I popped it over the top, and this spider was running around the glass. It had gone a little bit crazy. So that had gone into its sympathetic nervous system, into fight flight. And while the glass was on top of the spider, I thought to myself, I can't be so cruel and leave that spider there in that glass. Nor can I forget about it, because what happens if it falls over in the night? So what I had to then do was, again, put my big girl pants on, and I had to slide a piece of paper underneath the spider so that I could then take the glass with the paper on it and throw the spider outside. I'm not one for killing them if I can help it. So I did that and I felt really proud of myself. I got the piece of paper under the glass. And then I had another problem. As I went to tip the glass up, the paper was so bendy that the spider could get out. So then I had to think, right, I now need to get something solid underneath the glass, underneath the paper, to be able to pick the glass up. So I found a slim book, and then I picked the glass up at arm's length, took the glass, the book, to the back door, which, mind you, I hadn't opened. I hadn't thought about opening it before I picked the glass and the spider up. So then I had to figure out how I was going to get this spider out the door. So what I then had to do was put the book and the glass back down on the floor with the spider on it, open the door, and then pick it all back up again, take a few steps outside the door, and throw the spider away, which I managed to do. But then afterwards, after I'd done it, I ran back inside so the spider didn't beat me to the back door, and I had a real shake off. So, and my hair's all stood up on end, and I needed to give my body a bit of a stretch, and I checked the glass to make sure that there was no spider left in there, that I hadn't damaged the spider in any way. So yes, my conscience did make me think about, harming the spider, making sure that I hadn't done that. But what all this tells us is that my body, my system had worked for quite a long time in the stress system. And once I'd completed each task, I had to take a moment to just prepare myself for the next task. But when the whole task was over with, I had a real feeling of what we call trigger stacking. So trigger stacking is where multiple events happen one after the other after the other. So with anxious and stressed dogs, they have the same thing. So let's say your dog is worried or frightened of dogs, and you take them on a typical street walk, and they might leave the house already feeling a bit tense because they may encounter something that they don't like. Then they see a dog and they might be okay with that dog. But then they see another dog. They then see a dog barking. They then hear a dog barking in a window or behind a gate. They then see a dog running in a field. So it could be that you live in an area where there are small off-lead areas like we do here. That dog might not have approached them. They might not even have to make contact with any of those dogs, but the visual sign of those dogs creates that feeling of discomfort, that feeling of overwhelm. And so then what happens is they've encountered all these episodes and then they explode. And that's what we describe as trigger stacking in dog training. And it's the whole process of their nervous system being in that state of stress for a prolonged period of time and them not being able to rationalize it, to be able to move through it, to be able to do shake-offs, which I've spoken about in a previous episode. So if we understand our dog and we know that they get trigger stacked, or we know that they find a particular scenario overwhelming, but they do shake off and they process each moment beautifully, how do we help these dogs out? How do we help them progress with their education and with their training? Well, there's a beautiful company out there called My Anxious Dog, and they make yellow equipment for dogs who are anxious and nervous. And you can get things like lead slips, which tell people to leave your dog alone. They can wear jackets or little bandanas that say, please give my dog space. And that would be the first thing that I would go down. So that's a bit of a management strategy where you can place something on your lead or your dog that says, hey, give me space. The second thing is understand how you're feeling. So if you feel worried or anxious or a little bit nervous because you know your dog is going to react in a certain way, we need to be very mindful of our actions and how we are dealing and handling our dog, especially if you've got a particularly big dog which lunges and barks and creates holy hell when they see a particular trigger. So we have to be very aware of how we feel in those moments. And what I would say to you is start to reflect on your emotions, what it is that you're feeding back to your dog. And if it is that you feel anxious or nervous when you're handling your dog, then we need to do a little bit of work on that, or you need to do a little bit of work on that. But from your dog's perspective, letting them go at their pace is a really beautiful thing to do. Because one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is trying to rush their dog's progress. Owners want their dogs to just get used to it or just get over it. But actually, confidence doesn't grow through pressure. You might know yourself if you've been in a particularly scary environment. So let's take my spider incident. If I'd have had somebody with me who said, come on, Helen, you can do this. I believe in you. I might have gone, okay. But if they were particularly confident and liked spiders and took over, I would let them do that as well. So I would hide behind that person. But if that person said, no, like, I'm not going to do this for you, but I am going to be here holding your hand the whole step of the way, then that would make me feel a whole heap better. And actually, confidence grows through safe experiences. It grows through routine, and it grows through knowing what the outcome is going to be. And sometimes we have to create a little bit of space. So there's something called being over threshold. And over threshold is a distance between your dog and the trigger that they can cope with. So it could be 100 meters. It could just be 10 meters. But every dog, every human has the ability to cope in the presence of a trigger at a certain distance. So if we completely understand our dogs and we know what they can actually cope with and the distance at which they can cope, we've also looked at the correct equipment. So we might have some give me space jackets on or lead slips. We've also looked at ourselves and how we feel in that moment. Then what we need to think about is growing our own dog's confidence. And it might not be in the stereotypical ways that you think, but small wins are absolutely essential with these dogs. And confidence grows when dogs experience success. That might be something really simple, like walking past a person calmly at a distance, or watching another dog without reacting, or possibly even exploring a new place at their own space and time. Each small success tells the dog something important, that they handled it, they got it right, and it didn't feel scary. And those little moments stack up over time. So what sorts of things do you think we could do? Well, a nervous dog feels better when they have a really clear task to do. So it could be something like a hand touch or a middle or a finish exercise. And the finish exercise is where they come round the back of you and into heel. It could be doing some scenting games, so finding some food scattered in the grass. Or if you have a towel with you or a place board, you could send them to that. It could even be something really simple like carrying a toy. Now, this comes back to another little story that I have from many moons ago when I was working at Dogs for Good as an assistance dog trainer. And I had a little golden retriever girl who needed to go to a client up in Newcastle area, and she was going to take her into one of the big shopping centres quite regularly. So what I did with her training was I went into a big shopping centre to get her used to those areas. So I did that daily so that she was having that opportunity to experience the different sights, sounds, people. And this little dog initially started off quite wary. I'm not going to say she was super nervous, but you could definitely tell there was a hesitation. And what I did for that little dog was I gave her a toy to carry while she was going around the shopping centre. And actually, this made her feel a lot more comfortable. And she was able to cope a little bit better instead of looking and being a little bit shy and a little bit wary of the environment. She actually trotted along quite nicely because essentially she had a little bit of a pacifier in her mouth. And actually, my calm energy really helped her too. Now, I'm going to go on to another story about another little dog that I worked with some years ago who developed a fear of loud noises. And it originated from being out on a walk and a car backfired. And this car obviously made a really loud noise. And this little dog was petrified. Now, she was on a lead, thankfully, so she didn't bolt. But then what happened was the next day, the bin men came round to empty the bins. And with the slamming of the lids, the little dog started creating because she thought in her mind that these noises were the same as what she'd experienced out and about. And she generalised that noise of the car backfiring to the bin men. And so her protective mechanism kicked in, which was to bark and jump at the door. And you'd think to yourself, well, surely if a dog is nervous, they're not going to do that. But for her, she was in her known space in the house where she felt comfortable. And as she barked at the door, those bin men left. Little did she know that those bin men were leaving anyway. And so what ended up happening was this little dog became so reactive on bin day that the owners called me in. So this just shows you that generalization of that fear, that worry, that anxiety can actually manifest into being worried about other things which sound similar. And so what we need to do in these times is see what the trigger is, see what it is that has initially created that fear, and start to build small little wins. Now, training can really help with this because a tired dog is generally a very comfortable dog, but we don't want them overtired so they can't learn. So you're not going to take them out and just run the legs off them for 2 hours and then just go, oh, they'll be all right now because they're going to sleep. That's not really how it works. How it works is we take them out, we know hopefully what their trigger is, and we start working at a threshold that they find comfortable. And over time, that threshold gets smaller and smaller, and their confidence builds. But we can also do other things like teaching them tricks. which in that moment, if we ask for that trick that they have really enjoyed learning, it tells us whether they are fearful to the point of being distressed or they have got a slightly elevated worry. And the two things are very different, because a dog who's distressed won't eat and they won't do something simple. So these are the types of things that you test. But when we're in the safety of our homes, what you need to look at is teaching them something that they absolutely love doing, but is a very simple exercise like middle, spin, twist, high five, shake paws, anything like that. That's a very small but easily done exercise within a moment of stress. And when we can teach them that and we can ask for that out and about, hopefully our threshold gets smaller and smaller and we start to see improvement. But here, I'd like to just hit on a final thought. If you live with a nervous dog, just remember this. Progress doesn't usually happen in giant leaps. It happens in tiny steps. And you need to be observant enough to understand that your dog has taken a tiny step forward. But those small steps can completely transform how a dog feels about the world. And with patience, understanding, and the right guidance, nervous dogs can grow into incredibly brave animals. Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's made you think about your dog slightly differently. And if you'd like any more help, you can find me on Facebook or Instagram, or I am just about to launch the Insiders Club, which will have more great hints, tips, videos, courses that will be able to help you out with any of these things that I've been speaking about on the podcast over the last few weeks. If you'd like to know a little bit more, please leave a comment or reach out. But also, if you do enjoy the podcast, please do share it with anybody else who you think will find it useful. Until next week, take care. Thank you for spending this time with me. If today's episode helped you slow down, feel seen, or think a little differently about your dog, then it's done its job. Remember, progress isn't about perfection. It's about observation and reflection. You're not behind, you're not failing, and you're definitely not alone. Until next time, keep training kindly and try to keep up.